Our lives cannot function without cities and towns. As focuses of exchange, local area, and craftsmanship, they are the spots where invigorating things occur and advance is made. Entire developments have been driven by strong urban areas like Rome, London, and Paris. However, there are times when natural disasters strike cities. Although most natural disasters do not kill people, flooding a city with meters of water typically does. Then again, being lowered can frequently safeguard their remains for people in the future better than the outside, bringing about a few marvelously protected landmarks like Shicheng in China, frequently called the Atlantis of the East. Others toll less well. The people who once lived there watch as they are slowly reclaimed by the sea or buried in sand. 10. Thonis-Heracleion. Although Thonis-Heracleion is now virtually unknown, it was once one of the world's most important cities. Highlighted in numerous old Greek stories, it was where Heracles originally set foot in Africa. It was also one of the most important cities in ancient Egypt, before that, the center of international maritime trade, and a place where people from all over the world lived. It was first settled more than 4,000 years ago, and for well over a millennium, it was Egypt's trade capital. It was a melting pot of cultures. Greek and Egyptian defensive layer and weapons have been tracked down together in the city's depressed profundities close by sculptures which highlight both Hellenic and Egyptian workmanship styles. It was likewise a focal point of strict blend, where the new Greek Ptolemaic line was at that point starting to be revered and portrayed in workmanship as Egyptians. 1. In numerous ways, it was like cutting-edge Venice. In a wet lowland area of the Egyptian coast, the majority of the city was constructed on a series of small islands. It was mostly a maritime city with lots of canals and waterways and lots of ships. It was also slowly sinking, just like Venice today. The ground finally gave way at the end of the 2nd century BC, and a lot of the city either drowned in liquefaction or fell into the sea. It went on as an irrelevant town until the entire city was covered and forgotten around Promotion 800. 9. Port Royal. Jamaica was deliberately handed over to pirates when the English took it from the Spanish. Encircled by Spanish islands, any privateers who lived there would invest their energy bugging Spanish ships instead of English ones, and the presence of outfitted men on the island consistently would prevent the Spanish from overcoming it. The city of Port Imperial, the greatest settlement on the island, immediately turned into a privateer shelter. The wickedest city in the world was Port Royal at its height. Because it was a hub for piracy and trade, many people who lived there became extremely wealthy. This not well-gotten abundance drawn in a clamoring scene of boozers, prostitutes, and degenerate vendors who all added to the town's standing. Since there was very little control from the government, new residents built their homes on any available piece of land. When an earthquake occurred in 1692, there were almost no roads or stone buildings, so the entire town was practically destroyed. Today, it is minimal in excess of a fishing town, however many of the town's old structures can in any case be seen underneath the water. Local people fantasy about transforming it into a top-notch place of interest. But they can't do much without help from the government. 8 Lost Villages of Ontario. The United States of America and Canada began a joint project in the 1950s to connect the Great Lakes to the Atlantic, making it possible for ships to travel as far inland as Minnesota. This undertaking, the Holy Person Lawrence Seaway, was begun in 1954 and completed in 1959. It was an extraordinary achievement, yet, with one proviso: it required the flooding of 9 Canadian towns. The people group of Altsville, Maple Forest, Ridges, St. Nick Cruz, Dickinson's Arrival, Farron's Point, Moulinet, Mill Roaches, and Sheik's Island were undeniably lowered alongside a piece of Canada's Interstate 2, which must be revamped further upland. One of the oldest parts of Canada was this part of Ontario. Some of the villages were built on the sites of former Native American settlements, and many of them were built in the 1700s. The Mohawks ruled a significant portion of the region prior to the arrival of European settlers. More than 500 buildings and more than 6,000 people were all relocated to newly planned towns. Residents complained that their new homes did not have the same value as the ones they had to give up, contrary to what they had been promised. Today, the towns are in essence out of reach, lowered at the lower part of a bustling transportation path. They are, however, occasionally visible below the water, particularly at low tide. The fact that it happened so recently makes the lost villages particularly haunting. This means that there are a lot of pictures on the internet of people going about their daily lives when these villages were still in use. 7. Neapolis. When a tsunami struck in July 365, Neapolis, one of the most important Roman cities in Tunisia, was destroyed. Neapolis was destroyed as a result of the disaster, which also caused significant damage down the coast at Alexandria. For 1,700 years, the city was in the dark. Fortunately, it was rediscovered in the summer of 2017 after archaeologists spent 7 years searching for it. Despite being a Roman town at the time, Neapolis sided with Carthage in the Punic Wars. Because of this, the Romans almost completely forgot about Neapolis. As archaeologists had long thought, be that as it may, the city ended up being enormous and complex. The remains of roads and landmarks demonstrated that Neapolis was genuinely evolved. The most important industry in the town has been revealed by the discovery of over 100 tanks used in the production of the fish-based sauce garum. Archaeologists now believe that Neapolis may have produced more garum than anywhere else in the Roman Empire. Garum was a Roman delicacy that was produced on an industrial scale throughout the Roman Empire. 6. Villarejo de Furna. As per nearby custom, Villarejo de Furna was first gotten comfortable the primary 100 years by a Visigothic clan. Indeed, even as late as the 1970s, this little town of 200 or 300 individuals was all the while utilizing an old Visigothic majority rule framework. A single vote was given to each town family. Together, they chose a pioneer, who served a 6-month term, from among the town's hitched men. The 1950s saw the beginning of plans to construct a reservoir on the land surrounding the village. The public authority directed tests and overviews before at last starting the cycle in 1967. The townskin were cautioned in 1970. All of them had left by 1971, but not before building a brand new road so that trucks could get to the village to move their belongings. Even roof tiles were removed by people. The majority of the houses were merely shells when the last person left. 5. The fact that the village emerges from the water during the summer, when water levels are lower, is what makes Villarejo de Furna such an impressive location today. Visitors come to the Underwater Museum, which was established as a result of the association of former inhabitants of Villarejo de Furna's pressure, and to see the old town emerge from the reservoir. The world now knows about it. 5. Capel Selen. The last people who lived on Capel Selen left in 1962. The new Llyn Selen Reservoir, which had submerged the village, was officially opened in 1965. The duration of the opening ceremony was planned to be 45 minutes. However, only 3 minutes in, a few neighborhood Welsh activists cut the receiver wires, pursued from a close-by slope, and drove the horde of observers away. Years of rage culminated in this. Liverpool lacked a reliable water supply in the 1950s, making it one of England's poorest cities. The valley surrounding Capel Selen was found to be a suitable location for a new city reservoir after initial surveys. Sadly, Liverpool was in England and the valley was in Wales. At the lower part of the valley was the Welsh town with just 67 inhabitants. So Liverpool City Board didn't figure there would be an issue and squeezed ahead with the arrangement. They went through the Houses of Parliament rather than directly requesting permission from the local Welsh council, which caused controversy. When the bill had passed Parliament, they gave a land by request and set about building the repository. Numerous ribs were provoked up by the move, and the Welsh Patriot Party, Plaid Cymru, saw a spike in enrollment. Welsh protesters were said to have spit on and abused locals during demonstrations in Liverpool streets and elsewhere in Wales. The bomb, which was planted by 3 young Welshmen, exploded on the construction site. Numerous Welsh activists who supported their actions attended the court case that resulted. Regardless of the activists' earnest attempts, the arrangement went on and the inhabitants of Capel Selen were moved to new properties. However, Welsh nationalism significantly increased as a result of the town's flooding, and the expression "Remember Tryweryn" is still used in Wales today. Accordingly, the public authority pushed forward with a few drives and ridges, remembering more financing for modern positions for Llanwern and the main Welsh Language Act. For Gran. The Romans established themselves in a valley in the Alps at the beginning of the 1st century. The little town came to be known as Gran. It flourished throughout the Middle Ages, when a substantial church was constructed in the town. The congregation actually stands today, after 700 years. It is now surrounded by water rather than townhouses at this point. The only thing that remains of the village, which once had nearly 200 homes, is the bell tower of the church. The Italian Montecatini Company devised plans to construct a hydroelectric dam in 1939. There were 2 smaller lakes in the area. However, they intended to flood the valley between them and create a large lake. It was anticipated that this would generate sufficient power to sustain the region. Neighborhood opposition had proactively constrained the dropping of a comparative task in the Alps only years sooner, and local people were determined to doing it once more. Meanwhile, Italy was hauled into the Second Great War. The project was halted. However, once the war was over, they brought it back with more force, and the strategy failed. In 1950, the village and its surroundings became submerged. Because of the virus environs, the lake freezes over in winter, permitting sightseers to cross the water and contact the old chime tower. Some nights, the bells are said to be ringing, but they were taken down in July 1950. The lake is about 22 meters, 72 feet, deep, making it possible to dive to the old ruins. Sadly, such an expedition probably violates the law. 3. Potosi. The Venezuelan government also planned to flood a populated valley in 1985 in order to construct a hydroelectric dam. However, they carried it out with much less tact. Then President Carlos Andrés Pérez flew into the town by helicopter and let the inhabitants know that their territory would have been seized and they needed to leave. The 1,200 people who lived there were dispersed throughout Venezuela to live with family and friends, and a lot of the town was destroyed. The steeple of the church, which protruded from the water and was utilized by locals as a high water mark, was for a considerable amount of time the only remaining indicator of the town. This was the case up until 2010, when a particularly severe El Niño effect struck Venezuela. It set off a dry season that hit a large part of the country. The supply's water levels dropped by 30 meters, 98 feet, setting off energy proportioning across Venezuela. Yet it likewise implied that the entire church, including the cemetery, was on dry land alongside a couple of old houses and the town square. Before the drought ended, some of the older residents took advantage of the opportunity to visit their old home and pay their respects. 2. Petersburg. Today, Georges Lake Storm Thurmond, also known as Clarksville Lake, is a popular destination for swimmers and tourists alike. What is less known, however, is that it covers the once flourishing town of Petersburg underneath its uneven water. Dionysius Oliver established Petersburg in 1786 to capitalize on the expanding plantation economy in the Broad River Valley. It immediately turned into a vital station in the tobacco business and one of the primary spots where shipments were reviewed. By 1801, it was the third greatest town in Georgia. Guests portrayed it as an attractive town that was a focal point of exchange and culture, which just accomplished other things to help its prominence. However, it was evidently a convenient town, and its fate was linked to that of the tobacco plantations. By 1810, the cotton business was dominating and Petersburg fell into decline. When the town lost its post office in 1844, it was practically empty. The town was forgotten and abandoned by 1952, when the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers started filling the valley with water to make a lake. So normally, local people were shocked when a nearby dry season made the town rise up out of the lake in 2002. Before the water returned to its original height, the foundations of houses, pottery fragments, and old fences could all be seen for days. Since then, the town has appeared a number of times, each time during hot weather. Its creepy Victorian appearance made it a sham. 1 Shurcheng. China has been criticized in the past for moving a lot of people to complete public works projects. Over 300,000 people had to be relocated as a result of the construction of the Qiandao Lake. Some of these people had relatives who had lived in the area for generations. One of the greatest misfortunes of this activity, in any case, was the deficiency of the supreme city of Shurcheng, an old Ming city with amazing landmarks tracing all the way back to essentially the 1500s and most likely hundreds of years prior. There has been a city there since 208. In 1959, the area was flooded, and the city now sits at the bottom of a lake that is 40 meters, 130 feet, deep. Until the Chinese government organized an expedition in 2001 to survey the ruins and discover what was left, the city was forgotten. The old stone buildings had been extremely well preserved by the flooding, which surprised them. The city now looks almost exactly the same as it did when it was flooded, shielded from the usual soil, wind, and rain erosion. One of China's best preserved collections of imperial period artifacts is located in Shurcheng. In 2011, a project to recreate the city as it might have been in the past piqued even more interest among the public. There are now a number of ways for experienced divers to see the Atlantis of the East in person by going down with a group. In style, these dives are still considered exploratory. Divers have discovered a number of additional historic landmarks as part of the ongoing mapping of the lake's floor. If you love this video, please subscribe to the channel to receive the earliest notification of the next videos. Click the like and share button to spread this video to everyone. And please take a look at the video description to support us. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video.